the global security order has changed. We are all seeing now many more conflicts, not just conflicts of the conventional kind where there are wars in Europe, in the Middle East, and elsewhere. But I think we are also seeing new forms of emerging challenges on the cyberspace, even the protection of critical infrastructures and things like that. Now, so what does it mean for Singapore at the global level first, at the macro level? I think the first thing is something that will not change. We must continue to make sure that we are relevant and we can value add to the relationship, both bilaterally and multilaterally. If we are not relevant, we will not have a voice. If we are not principled, we will not be able to engender the trust for other people to want to work with us. So that has not changed. Now, having said that, MINDEF and SAF have done over the years is that we must continue to diversify our portfolio of defense relationships. Interestingly, in the past, when people talk about building their defense relationships, I think people tend to take a more geographical perspective, that generally you work with people in and around your region. But today we are seeing many more challenges that transcend the narrow geographical confines. That is a new challenge, but that is also an opportunity for us to expand the network of relationships. So there are many programs that we can work with partners that are further afield, in Europe, in Northeast Asia, or elsewhere, that previously we may not have considered or not have focused as much attention. So it also provides opportunities for us to do this. Now, in the US and China contestation, our position is that we do not have quarrels with either the US or China. We constantly look for ways to value add to the relationships. Our relationship with the US is deep and broad-ranging. Our relationship with China is also growing, and we try to work on areas that are of mutual interest. So it's the same for both the US and China. Now, having said that, the most important thing that we must do is to take positions that are based on principles that best support our survival and success. Principles of sovereignty, principles according to the rules of warfare, principles that promote the safe passage through international waters and airspace. So there are a set of principles that we will continue to abide by, set of principles that we will support in order to give ourselves as a small country the best chance for survival. So on the global scale, notwithstanding the tensions, the wars, the fraying of the global security order, we will continue to play our part to make sure that we support the adoption of principles that best support our long-term survival and success. So that's at the global level. And I think we will constantly build upon the generations of work that has been done to expand our portfolio of defense relationships. And as I mentioned, actually now it has given us many more opportunities. For example, even on the defense, the resilience of the supply chain side. People are looking to strengthen their supply chains, and we can play a useful role. When people look for a +1 relationship, we can be the +1 partner if we are principled and we are able to make a contribution. So that gives us new opportunities. So that covers the first bucket of international relations. Now, then the question, perhaps taking off from where Xingming asked, how does this impact us? It impacts us in the following ways. A more uncertain global security environment will certainly lead to or reinforce the uncertainties in the economic environment. And this will then have implications of the job opportunities in our country, the kind of wages that our people can command, and even the prices that we have to pay for the commodities that we have. And why would the average Singaporean be concerned? Because of jobs, wages, and prices. What is happening on the security front is closely intertwined with what is happening on the economic front. So there's one set of issues as to why we should be concerned. Now there's another set of issues that we should be concerned, and there's more security related. So if you take the example of the most recent conflict in Iran, supposing Iran wants to take retaliatory actions against either the US or Israel. They may hit out at the US targets. They may also hit out at other targets. And this may not just be limited to targets in the US or in Israel. It could be in anywhere else in the world. It could also stoke up emotions in the region, and we must be careful that these do not spill into terrorist activities or what we call activities by proxies to fulfill the aims of the people behind. So the security concerns have actually heightened because of all these conflicts that we are currently facing. And the security concerns goes beyond the conventional security concerns of terrorism. It could also take the new forms of threat actions, like things that happen in the cyberspace. So just to give a context, today we are not at war, but neither are we at peace. Today, every day, the SAF is operating somewhere in between. On the cyberspace, the number of threat incidents that we have to deal with every day with other government agencies is not a small number. The type of information operations that people conduct, perhaps directly on us and sometimes indirectly on us where we are the collateral, is also not something that we will take lightly. On the other hand, if you look at the Air Force, every year, the number of air threats that they have to verify to keep our airspace safe goes into the hundreds. The number of ships that our Navy and the Maritime Security Task Force has to deal with to ascertain their intent and to make sure that the Singapore Straits and our our strategic lines of communications remain open goes into the thousands. The number of operations that the Army has to work behind the scene to make sure that nothing appears in your news cycle actually is also not small. So today we are not at war, but neither are we at peace. Today, every day, across all the 4 services of the SAF, they have to deal with a range of threats and challenges on a daily basis. I think this is something that most Singaporeans may not appreciate, because for us, success is when things don't appear in your news cycle. If we look back at the history of the SAF in the last 60 years, well, there will be instances whereby we are in the public consciousness. It could be the 1970s, the Laju incident. It could be SQ-117. It could be Operations Flying Eagle. It could be our participation in the national effort to counter SARS or COVID. These are things that I think people see once in a while, but actually behind all these high-profile events, there are many day-to-day activities that the SAF has to be on alert in order to keep Singapore safe, and that our way of life as it is not and won't be disrupted. So But having said that, the nature of the threat has changed. Today, what we are seeing on the cyber front, the concept of us having to deal with this is not new. Okay, let me be frank, it's not new. Even when I was in the SAF, we were talking about these kinds of threats 20, 30 years ago. Computer viruses, worms, algorithms that can sabotage our networks, infiltrate our networks. Conceptually, these have been in existence for 20, 30 years. I myself was dealing with this kind of issues even when I was a major in the force, and that was in the 1990s. But the volume, the intensity, that has changed. You mentioned about the drones. The drones operating in swamps is not something new. I don't know whether you all remember, many years ago, maybe about 10 years ago, in one of our National Day parades, we demonstrated the ability to orchestrate a swarm of drones to form a heart shape at the end of the parade. Those technologies have been available many years ago. But I think the way which people have applied them, the intensity which people have used them, and the way that they have blurred the lines between military and civilian use, all that have changed. So of course, having said that, the way the SAF built the capabilities is not whether we don't do it at a long cycle. We don't do it just because there's a new defense minister. Actually, many of the capabilities that the SAF has today is built up through the generations. Many of the things that I talked about, even during or before my time as the Chief of Army, today they come to fruition because it takes time, not just to buy the technology, but to build up the capabilities and to operate them. So that is how long that cycle is required. So of course, the SAF is constantly looking, not the challenges of today, the drones, the cyber, those we are dealing with it, and we have capabilities to deal with it. Of course, we will continue to want to improve. The challenge for the SAF in the past, and it is now, is to ask ourselves, what will be those new challenges that will emerge in 5, 10, or 15 years, so that we can put in place the capability development programs now, even before the threats emerge, so that by the time the threats emerge, we already have the capabilities to deal with them. And that's why many of our projects are classified so that we stay ahead of the curve. We don't always publicize all that we do, but at the appropriate time, we will review those capabilities to let Singaporeans have the confidence that we are ready. And there will be many capabilities in the SAF whereby we will never review. The fact that we don't have to review them, we don't have to use them, and by the time they get retired, to us that is success. Okay, so that has to do with the new war-fighting capabilities. Now that comes to a very interesting part that you mentioned, which is how is warfare going to change and how does that gel with our manpower situation? Going forward, we can expect operations to be conducted in a more decentralized way, with smaller units operating compared to the large size forces that we have in the past. Now, what does that mean for the SAF? Well, the first thing is that the SAF, ever since 1965, have never depended on the size of its manpower. It has always worked on the basis that technology is our multiplier. And if anything, going forward, the new generations of technology that is coming in across the world will allow the SAF to multiply its manpower capabilities even more. So just to give an example, in the past you see big infantry units, big armor units, few hundred people maybe operating in 2-3 subunits. That's the general structure. But going forward, you may see the unit being smaller, but the number of subunits growing more because they operate with more technology in a more decentralized way. And actually, that plays to the strength of the SAF, because it plays to the strength of the SAF by having the quality of manpower and leadership that we have across the entire SAF. I must say this, I've made these observations ever since I was in the military. Some people think that having NSF or NSmen is a disadvantage for the SAF. We never think so. Because by having NSF and NSmen, we are able to have the best across the entire society operating our systems, participating in the design of our systems. And the reason why the SAF is able to operate in a more decentralized fashion is because of the quality of our leaderships. We are able to induct the best people across the entire society through our NSF and our NSmen to operate these systems. Now, it's quite different to say that I have one commander for 100 men. It's another thing to say that now I can have 10 commanders and each one of them operating with 10 men. The quality of leadership is much tougher. The ability to use the technologies to operate with the 10 men to have the effect of the 100 men is much more difficult. And you can only do so if you can bring in the best people from across the whole society to do this. And that is why our NSF and our NSmen have consistently performed comparable to others, if not often better than others, because of the quality of leadership. So going forward, actually you will see that there will be more leadership opportunities for many of our NSF and NSmen, because we are going to increase the amount of technology that is required, and we are going to have more decentralized operations based on this. And you have seen this in the warfare in the recent conflicts, that people are operating in much smaller units, but much more powerful units, because they can call upon the war-fighting capabilities of the entire system. So that's one. But having said that, there's a second dimension that I want to talk about, which is you talk about women, you talk about volunteers. Actually, there will be many more opportunities for women and the people who have not served NS to contribute in the SAF Volunteer Corps. Today, the SAF Volunteer Corps has operated for quite some years already, and actually we have very good response from the public. Today, for every one person selected for the SAF Volunteer Corps, we have 8 applicants. And we are asking ourselves if we can review the program to allow more people to participate, maybe not the same intensity, maybe at different levels of intensity, depending on the skill sets that people bring. So that is a tremendous advantage for us. And it's actually, to us in MINDEF and SAF, it's very heartening to see the support for the SAF Volunteer Corps. And more women are coming forward, not just to serve in the SAF Volunteer Corps, but also in the regular Corps. Because with the technologies that we are bringing in, the physical demands are quite different. In fact, the intellectual demands are also quite different. And today, as we expand the deployment of female officers across the entire 4 services of the SAF, we see much more opportunities for them to make contributions. And today, indeed, as I go around the SAF, the number of women that are serving across the different formations have all gone up. Now, having said that, be it men, women, minorities, or anyone, our basis of selection for people is based on merit. There are always two very fundamental considerations on how we select and deploy people. And for us, we do not want to make any other criteria to be the defining criteria. It has to be based on, first, the ability of the person to carry out its duty. That is based on merit. Number two, it must be based on the best deployment that will allow us to make use of best use of the person's ability. So you don't want a square peg in a round hole. So that is how we will continue to operate. We will never apply tokenism to any deployment. It does injustice to the individual, it does injustice to the system. Now, having said that, whether we will see any minority or anyone taking up senior positions in the SAF is not a here and now issue. It is a continuous effort. Because for us to get a chief warrant officer, for us to get a brigadier general or whatever, ME7, that person must be in the force for the last 20 over years. What we are seeing today, this year, is the result of our effort to step up our outreach and recruitment for the SAF we won 20 years ago. Today, this week, when you see some of the people who are promoted to the highest rank in the SAF, I knew them as junior officers and warrant officers. And today is the result of what we have seen, continuous work that we have done over the last 20 years. And that continue. And the SAF will continue to broaden our recruitment of people from diverse walks of life. Now, having said that, then I want you to ask whether there are certain things that will shift. So besides what I've talked about in the geopolitical front, the way the war fighting is going to be, but I think there will also be some shift in the way that we see how we engage our people. In my mind, my mental model is always this. There are interlocking rings of our defense system. You have the 50,000 High Readiness Corps. These are men and women, NSF regulars, who are always ready. It is the heart of the sharp tip of the spear, if you like. Then we have 250,000, what we call the full force potential, where we mobilize for operations, 250,000. But these don't form the entire SAF. Actually, beyond these two rings, there is a 750,000 ex-NS men. And this group of 750,000 NS men are equally important because they are the advocates, they have gone through the system, they are the advocates of why defense is important. But increasingly, this 750,000 can also play a very useful and important role in our defense. Because in the past, where the physical demands are much higher because of the way the war fighting is done, maybe we will retire people after 12 years. That means 2 years as an NSF and then 10 years as an NS man. But increasingly, you are seeing that actually many more people beyond those ages are coming back to the SAF to contribute in very specific niche areas based on the skill sets that they have, the technologies that they can apply. Actually, this is a rich source of talent that we can also have in the SAF. Now, beyond that, beyond the 750,000 ring, it is what I call the 1.5 million ring and these are the 1.5 million. The SAF can only perform with the support of the 1.5 million. This includes all the family members who are behind every NS man. And you all will know the saying that when one person serves in the SAF, the entire family serves. And that is the strength of our defense. Now, as part of this 1.5 million is actually our 200,000 employees. They are also a critical part of our defense ecosystem, because the kind of support and recognition that they give to our NS men will send a strong and powerful signal on the strength of our defense. So going forward, besides our efforts to engage what we call the 50,000 and the 250,000 HRC, High Readiness Corps, and the Full Force Potential, we will also make sure that we engage the 750,000, the 1.5 million, and the 200,000 employers out there. Because the strength of our system is the entire nation and not just the 50 and the 200 or the 250,000. That is how I mentally see it. We have received many suggestions on how we can allow people who are currently not in the SAF to perhaps experience some parts of the SAF, be it through the SAF Volunteer Corps or be it through some other means, and we will study that and see how we can do some outreach. And some of this might be also combined with the way that we organize our training area. So for example, you talk about just now the training areas. There will always be requirement for us to have live firing out in the open for certain caliber of weapons, especially the longer range weapons. That's why we have open ranges, as what we have in Nisun, the 500 meter range, or the Poyang 500 meter range. But we also have the multi-mission range complex, which is a 7-in-1 range complex for different kinds of shootings, day and night, different scenarios. But going forward, I think the Army is also exploring to see whether we can build another multi-mission range complex that have new capabilities, but will also allow us to have our NS men come back on a more regular basis to shoot. The concept is, can one day we have people coming back to maintain the currency of their skills, just as they do fitness conditioning across the entire island? Can that new facility also be a chance for us to allow more people to experience a slice of national service? So these are things that we'll think through, and when we are ready, we'll make more announcements. But having said that, it's not just about the volume of training area, if you like, in Singapore. There are two parts of it. One is, even with the finite training areas that we have, how do we intensify the usage? So Safety City is a good example. The same area that we today commit to Safety City in the past may only allow a certain number of people to train. But today, with the instrumentation that we have built up in that compact city, the throughput is much higher. Likewise for the MMRC. The MMRC footprint is maybe 2-3 conventional ranges, but it is actually 7 ranges in one, and they can do 24-hour cycle. So this is how we try to increase the capacity of our training areas, not just in terms of land area, but in terms of the intensity. Are we going to make use of the polder in Tekong to expand our training areas? Certainly yes, but that is just one means for us to do so. Are we constantly looking at new training areas overseas to meet our operational requirement? That is also certainly yes. And so far, I think we have been fortunate. We have been blessed with many valued partners who allow us to train overseas. From Australia, where we have expanded the Shoalwater Bay training areas, to other countries where we allow the SAF to train different components in different parts. So we'll continue to do this. So locally, we'll optimize our training areas. We will see how we can intensify the usage, combining conventional training means with new technologies. We also look at new areas, whether it's in Tekong, where the polder areas are. But we are looking at overseas training, and that also allows the SAF to train in a more varied environments to meet different operational scenarios. Are we looking at more opportunities to have more bilateral exercises with our partner countries? The answer is certainly yes. So like yesterday, even as I was talking to Defense Minister of Indonesia, Pak Shafri, we also talk about how we can work together, Air Force, Army, Navy, work together on how we can mutually work together to develop training areas that will benefit both armed forces. And this is also another example of how both sides can stretch our defense dollar and also to bring about greater interoperability between the armed forces. So that's another area of development. So that covers pretty much the manpower and the training land development. So let me just go through and see whether, you talk about technology. Maybe the only talk about for Kayang. AI, yes, AI, quantum, these are new technologies that we are constantly looking at. But we don't want to be caught in these fads that people use terms and then they bandit it around. I think for us, we've been looking at many of these technologies for many years. We want to be able to apply them to what we call tangible use case. So it's not applying things in general, but very specifically how it helps us. Of course, many of these things will come in very importantly in the new area of our digital domains, whether it's AI or whether it's quantum. But these are things that we are certainly looking at. Yeah. On the security outlook, I just want to add one thing to Kayang's point is, if we are relevant, people want to partner us. And that's why we must remain relevant. Relevant with good perspectives that people appreciate. Relevant because we have capabilities that we can bring to the table. If we are irrelevant, nobody wants to talk to us and nobody wants to partner us. So that continuous search for relevance and develop capabilities that are relevant is important. Okay, so the falling birth rate, leadership ethics, I think I've touched on that. Women and volunteers, I've touched on that. Iran, we have touched on that. Security impact on the SAF. Female participation, yes, we've touched on that. Key issues, priorities. Okay, for it were, you mentioned one thing about coming back, whether things have changed or not changed. Actually, I haven't been away that long. I left in 2011 as the Chief of Army, but I was back as MOS and Second Minister for Defense until 2015. So maybe 10 years. But there are certain things in SAF that don't change very much, and I hope that it doesn't change very much. And I'll tell you what are some of the things that don't change and what are things that change. First thing that the SAF don't change and won't change very much is the value systems. And this is something that I think for everyone who have served, they will appreciate the value system. The second thing that the SAF don't change and must not change is the constant search for answers to tomorrow's challenges. The SAF is not interested in just trying to answer yesterday's exam question with yesterday's answers. The SAF is constantly challenging ourselves to what will be the new challenges tomorrow? So just to give some examples, right? I mean, I've mentioned that 25 years ago, even when I was a major, we were thinking about the kind of computer cyber threats that is now so common today, right? After 9/11, I share with you all this story that when I visited the Special Forces, they were not trying to just figure out how to prevent another 9/11. Of course, that they must do. But they were asking themselves, what is the new threat that can emerge from some of these terrorist groups having done 9/11? And some of the scenarios that they developed actually came to fruition because it actually happened thereafter. So today, the SAF is not just asking ourselves how to counter some of these unmanned air systems, drones, cyber threats. These are known threats that we have been talking about for many years, and we'll continue to upgrade our capabilities. But today, the challenge for the SAF is to ask ourselves this. In 5 to 10 years' time, what will be those new and emerging challenges that today nobody has talked about yet? And we have to start thinking about it. So that's the thing that... So these are the two things that I always appreciate that SAF don't change. The value systems, to take care of your men and women under your charge, to put the nation before self, all these value systems must not change. The forward-looking part of the thing that so must not change. But of course, the SAF has changed and must continue to change in the way it evolves its warfighting tactics, techniques, and procedures. So we talk about how today warfare will be much more decentralized. Today it will be a lot of man-unmanned system working together. We'll talk about using technologies to multiply the capabilities that we have. And today, there are also many low-cost precision technologies that the SAF will have to adopt as part of our efforts to stretch our defense dollars, right? Because it's very important, right? We are the smallest country around, right? So every dollar that we spend, we must make sure that we get the maximum impact, right? It doesn't make sense if we spend $1 and people spend 50 cents to counter us, right? It must be the other way around, right? That whatever we spend, the threat must spend more, right? We cannot be trying to outspend people to win, right? So there are things that will change, right? Okay, so training, we talk about the training, and you talk about, so you talk about the new NSF, right? Mothership, right? Actually, I must give you some quite inspiring examples. You know, once upon a time, where drones were first introduced into the SAF, in the past, you know, the people that designed the console that flies the drone, this was quite some years back, and now I can share this, actually came from a game station, the games console. Actually, the people who helped us to design this were the NSF-2B. You know, when we had our armored fighting vehicles, we were one of the first ones to do what we call the drive-by-wire. That also came from our polytechnic students. You know, the wonder about having an NSF system is this: you have many great ideas across the entire system, and they are designing systems that they will use in the future when they come in. So today, and in the past, we constantly tap on the talent of our NSF or the pre-enlistees even. We ask them, how would you design a system that you will use? So I just give you 3 examples. So the UAV, when we were flying the UAV, the initial generation of UAV, the console, it was one of those PlayStation consoles. People in my generation probably have trouble trying to use all the 10 fingers to play around with that, right? But the younger generation took to it like a fish to water. Then our armored vehicles, when we say we drive by wire, in the past it used to be clutches, wheels, and then when you start to drive by wires, many of these things, the ideas came from many of our pre-enlistees, polytechnic students. And the beauty of it is that they gave this idea, we worked on it. By the time they become NSF and NS-men, they're actually using it. There was also another example I can recall. Once upon a time, where they have this rifle, the SAR-21, M16 and SAR-21, right? Then they wanted to put some information system onto it so that when you aim the rifle, you can see the target and then the information can be transmitted back, right? That also came from the NSF and NS-men. In fact, the older generation of soldiers were trying to figure out how to aim and then how to pass on the message back, right? The NSF of that generation could aim and without even looking at the keypad could do it seamlessly. So I always have great respect for the type of talent that we have in our system. No, even in my time, this was in the 1990s when I was attending one of my, I think it was a company's tactics course. That was the one that prepared you to be a company commander. The person who introduced the computer to draft our battle plans and orders was an NS-man. He was an NS-man in my course. I still remember he worked in Apple. So he came back, he was like, hey, why you're using all this manual way of preparing orders and churning orders? In the past it was quite laborious. He says, why don't I show you how you can use computers. That era was the 5.25-inch floppy disk type, But okay, you may laugh at it, right? But that was quite advanced in the 1990s. But it reinforces the point that never underestimate the power of our NSF and NS-men in contributing good ideas and even bringing the best technologies from the civilian world and apply it to the military. So I always have a great respect for our NSF and NS-men and what they can do for Singapore. And today when we talk about flying drones, right? One of these days I think we will show you how we are training the BMT soldiers to do some of these things. But actually today we don't have to try very hard because today many of them are flying drones outside already. Many of them have real capabilities to do this. So I think we just make use of what they have. Okay. But this thing about having more decentralized units and therefore having a higher requirement for leadership is also something that very few militaries can do, and the SAF must be one of them because of the quality of our people.
Just some follow-up questions. So, first question, you talked about how the SAF is constantly dealing with threats that go unreported or behind the scenes. Can you give us a flavor of what are some of the biggest threats facing Singapore, and what are these threat actors doing to threaten Singapore? And I have a second question on your comment about expanding our portfolio of defense relations. Could you tell us a bit about who we are seeking to partner and which relationships we are seeking to develop, and what does that mean for our traditional defense relationships?
Oh, Thanks. Okay. So the first part of the question, I think I gave you a bit of a flavor. If I just take an example across the 4 services, if you look at the DIS, the digital domain, today, every day, we are dealing with the other whole of government agencies, thousands of attempts to penetrate our systems. Sometimes it could be just people fooling around, but often I think people are doing this very intentionally and probably with malicious intent. And it's a 24/7 operation to keep our system safe and secure. Because if they penetrate our system, it's not just a reputational issue or loss of some classified information. There could be real consequences on simple things from our banking system to whether our energy, our power grid will work, our water grids will work, our financial systems will work. So there are real issues that, of course, it's not just MINDEF, it's the whole of government, and MINDEF plays a part in this thing. If you look at the Air Force, right, on average, every year, we have to scramble our air defense assets to verify unknown threats. And the number of, you know how dense our air traffic pattern is? To be able to sift through that, it goes into the hundreds of cases that we have to deal with. Of course, not everyone we have to scramble, but to a certain intent to track. For the Navy, it's the same thing. The number of ships that sail through the narrow Straits of Singapore, the number of boarding that we have to check and verify to make sure that the straits remain safe from threat actors, that goes into the hundreds as well. In fact, sometimes thousands. For the Army, together with the home team, the kind of things that we have to do behind the scene to prevent undesirable actors from disrupting our way of life. And these are not just high-profile events, right? I mean, high-profile events, if we have a summit where world leaders are here, of course, those I think people see it. But day to day, even as we speak today now, given the current security situation around the world, there will be a need for us to heighten our vigilance in various installations and various places, because we don't know whether we'll become collateral in other people's fight. Right? On the information sphere, where people are constantly trying to shape our people's thinking, those are also things that we have to work on a daily basis. That's why today, we are not at war in the conventional sense, neither are we at peace in the conventional sense. We are always operating somewhere in between with different gradations, and that's what keeps us on our toes always. On your second point about where are some of these new partners, I think from Shangri-La Dialogue you will know, many of the previous partners that we have will continue to work closely with us. This could be Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, the US, China. These are Australia, New Zealand. These are our traditional partners, including the UK, the FPDA arrangement, the 5 power defense arrangements. But going forward, there are interests from many European countries to step up, working with us both on the technological front, but also on the supply chain resilience front. Even working with ROK and Japan, because now there are common issues, common threat challenges that we have, from the cyber domain to the supply chain resilience to the critical infrastructure protection. So this opens up avenues for us to work with many more partners.
2 follow-up questions. One is actually on spending. So you mentioned that we are neither in a state of peace and neither in a state of war, so we are somewhere in between. So do you think the current spending that the SAF have per year in terms of percentage of GDP, do you think is sufficient, or are we looking at adjusting it? So that's the first part. And the second one is you mentioned about increasing leadership opportunities. So does that mean in future we will have higher intakes in especially schools and officer schools for people who are serving their NS? Thank you.
Okay. So the first question is straightforward. We have been fortunate that we have the public and political support for us to spend up to 6% of our GDP on defense. Over the last many years, we have hovered around 3+%. But that's just strictly on the MINDEF SAF part. It has not included the other parts, which if you add in will be a bit more, because there's of course the home team, there's also the cyber side and so on and so forth. I think we will continue to spend prudently and spend where we think that it will give us bang for a buck. and not just to set ourselves a target to up this expenditure or down the expenditure. But many things that we spend will be what we call a multi-year programs. So we must make sure that whatever we spend is sustainable. Because to build a capability requires many years. What we don't want is what we call the feast and famine kind of spending, whereby you go and buy a lot of things when you have money and then you find that you can't maintain it. That's not how we stretch the defense dollar. In fact, to stretch the defense dollar, every time when an approval is made at HQ, we don't just look at the current expenditure, we look at what we call the tail. How do we and how are we able to sustain the tail until we retire the capability? So that is how we budget for our defense. There will be areas that we will need to spend more because of the new nature of the warfare, but the capabilities required may not correspond to just the amount spent, because today there are also new opportunities for us to look at other low-cost options to complement what we have and what we need. So I think we will continue on that trajectory. Now, the second part of your question was related to leadership. It's not just the number of people that will go to OCS and CSPAC, SES that may change. It is also the leadership at different levels. Because when you expect to do more decentralized operations, you require leadership at more levels, and there will be more leadership opportunities for many of our NSF. So the other day when I visited the DIS as an example, the DIS don't operate on a platoon company structure like the conventional army, whereby 30 men, 100 men kind of things. They operate in teams of 3, 5, depending on the nature of the jobs. But each and every one of them must be able to take leadership because of the technology that they are using and applying. And actually, it's not so easy. It's not a brute force kind of operations. So I think it's not just at the officer or the warrant officers level, it's also leadership opportunities at the military domain areas. It is also, even beyond these conventional causes, we can expect leadership training for a much bigger group of people. This applies to both the NSF and also the NSmen, right? And especially as things becomes more technical, things become more decentralized, you can certainly expect the leadership demands to go up. Okay, any final one or two questions? Yeah, Aslan.
Minister, you spoke about how tensions elsewhere can affect the men and women on the street in terms of jobs, the economy. You referenced the Iran-Israel conflict, and also in the Shangri-La dialogue, you were very specific about Singapore's position in the US-China tensions. How about conflicts closer to home, physically closer to home, for example, recently between Thailand and Cambodia, and also the ongoing war in Myanmar? How do they affect the everyday Singaporean differently? And another question about manpower, when you spoke about how the outreach will be reviewed and how more outreach to volunteers and also women will take place in the coming times. But my question specifically is on conscription. Is conscription of women something that will be considered with the manpower challenges? Thank you.
Okay. So the conflicts in today's interconnected world, the conflicts that happens elsewhere, geographically further away, and the conflicts that happen perhaps nearer home, actually they share certain similarities. What are the things that we are grappling with? The first is uncertainty. Because when people are uncertain, when businesses see greater uncertainty, they are less likely to invest. And that means likely to be fewer jobs. That means recruitment likely to come down. And that's not good news. Then, if people are worried about insecurity, then people are again likely to hold back their investment. So it's again not so good news. If you look at the Iran conflict, the volatility of the oil prices feeding into the economic system, that again caused quite a lot of uncertainty, and perturbations. So there are real impact of all these security incidents. Ukraine has disrupted the global supply chain for many food products, and that will certainly fit into where we are. Oil prices, food products, essentials, people trying to diversify. Because once you start to break up the global supply chain, everybody is working on what we call the local optimal rather than the global optimal, which means that prices are likely to go up rather than down. So the impact is not to be underestimated. If prices go up, jobs go down, wages don't grow, it's a very tricky situation itself. Right? So that's why we never underestimate this. How Singapore can provide and position ourselves as an oasis of calm requires tremendous effort. The fact that people say that I can invest in Singapore because I'm less likely to face a security incident, whether it's terrorism or whether it's a disruption of our energy supplies or water supply, all that adds to our overall competitiveness. And that's why whether the security ecosystem functions well or not is also in support of the national economic system. So I think there's a lot of interlinkages today between economics and security. When people talk about whether their data is secured, their critical infrastructure, including underwater infrastructure, is secure, that is both a security and an economic challenge. On the issue of conscription for women, someone reminded me this, that in our constitution, actually it just says that all able-bodied Singaporeans can be conscripted. We have not conscripted women in the past because we did not, in the past, see that operational need for it. Will we take that step one day that women might have conscription, or we need to conscript women? Then I must say these are the following considerations. First, whether is it men or women, if we want to do conscription, there must be a real operational need for it. That must always drive it. And once you have conscription, it must be done with a few basic principles. It must be universal, everybody must serve, and so on and so forth. That I think we are familiar with. Then the question is that even without full conscription, are there calls for more women to be given the chance to experience national service? I think we have heard that loud and clear. And over time, I think many more of them want to experience and see, and also to contribute. And that's why I think we have such a strong support for the SAF volunteer call. Many of them are women who wants to know also what the men are doing, and also they want to make a contribution. So I think over time, even without making that decision, I think there will be a demand for more exposure, and I think this is where MINDEF is thinking through how we can also respond to this demand for greater exposure. But I don't think we are making that decision now. But short of that decision, are there more opportunities for the women to see and experience and contribute? Oh yes, certainly. And I think MINDEF will respond to that. Yeah. Actually, I must say that it's a very comforting position. It's not. When we first started the SAF Volunteer Corps, we were not so sure what the response is. But today, for us to take in one for every 8 interested person, I think it's a very strong signal of our the public support and interest to do this. And because today, of the way the SAF organizes itself, with more diverse job scopes, catering to the different capabilities of different people, it allows us to bring in more people into our system. Not just women, but also ex-NS men who have capabilities in different areas. So actually today, our defense ecosystem has evolved quite a lot from many years ago, the mental model of 18 to 30-year-old men. Today actually it's a much more diverse and much stronger ecosystem. Yeah. I don't know. Will you support? Yeah. No. You asked about women conscription. Right? Is this a loaded question that you... do you have a view or not? Huh? Or you don't have a view? I see. But I have heard many comments on this, and I listened carefully, and I think it has shifted across generations. It has shifted across generations. But I think what has been consistent is this. One is that all conscription men or women must serve an operational need. You don't just call people in just for the sake of it. Because if you want to do national education or any other thing, there are other ways to do it. But you must serve an operational need. And every country who wants to make this decision must abide by this principle. And once you do that, you must abide by the principle of equity, universality, and so on and so forth. But if you want to achieve other objectives to meet some national education perspective, or there are other ways for it, which is why MINDEF is also looking at to see how we can expose or give more opportunities for people to be exposed to this. And I think that will also strengthen the understanding and appreciation of defense and security across the country. I have people who suggested to me that why don't you make available the opportunity to at least shoot a SAR-21 for everyone in Singapore. We hear such suggestions once in a while. And then we think about it, we think, yeah, if there's merits and if we can organize and afford it, yeah, there are some merits to this. Yeah. There are some people who tell me that everybody in Singapore, men or women, must know how to at least have some first aid lessons. I thought, yeah, okay, there are also merits, but of course we must take all this and then consider how to do this in a practical way. Yeah. Okay, maybe one last two questions then.
Just a question about the NS experience. So we know that NS is a rite of passage for guys in Singapore. Spent 2 years training, and a lot of time is spent away from their families. That said, the time away from partners could also mean that breakups are more commonplace. So breakups during NS. Like, because the guys spend time in camp, right? Then, more time away, then got breakups.
There are also many stories of people who got closer through NS.
No, I mean, I think it's, I hear more of the trend of the breakups, but I mean, I'm just curious to know, what advice would you give, people in such a situation to help them with their mental well-being?
I don't know, I can't answer the question because I don't have statistics one way or the other. But I must say that I've heard stories both sides. I have heard stories whereby the women folk are so supportive, and that's why I say that sometimes it's the whole family going to NS together. It's not just one person. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, my follow-up would be, just now you also mentioned about how business will see uncertainty.
Sorry.
How business will see uncertainty in times like this, like how wages might go down or wages might not change and business might not be hiring as much. So how should residents react in times like this? Should we be more prudent with our spending as well? Or how should we ensure our job is secured? Things that we can do. Okay,
so this is not exactly a MINDEF question, but since I have other portfolios, I should also address this. First, I think we should be prudent with our spending regardless of times. good times and tough times, we should be prudent with our spending. So that's one. But I think we don't have to lose heart because we are not the only one facing these challenges. All these security challenges affecting the business confidence and therefore the jobs and wages, all these are actually experienced by people across the world. But in Singapore, I think we can take comfort in the following things, and we should play to our strengths. Number one, make sure that we continue to have a secure and stable business environment. That requires the security agencies, the economic agencies, the political leadership to be able to signal to people that we are still that place where you can get stability, security, and the rule of law. So this is one set of issues that I think we must play to our strengths. The second set of issues that we must play to our strength is our commitment to constantly invest in our people. that even during tough times, and maybe particularly during tough times, we will continue to step up our investment for our people. That's why we have made Skills Future a central pillar of our social compact, because this is coming from my previous appointment as MOE, that I've always said it's not just about investing in our people for the first 15 years. It's also about investing in our people for the next 50 years, so that throughout a Singaporean's life in his time in Singapore, he can have the assurance that through good times and tough times, the Singaporean will be able to have the benefit of a system that constantly support them to upgrade so that they are relevant, they are competitive, and I think that's important. Then having said that, I think this one I will leave it to DPM Gan to share with you more details soon on the work of the Economic Resilience Task Force. They are not looking just at what to do in the here and now in the next few months. Of course, there are measures that we can if the situation warrants it. But on the other hand, they are also looking at how to position Singapore in the longer term, given the shift in the global security and economic environment. How to position ourselves where supply chain resilience is much more important. Technology, disruptive technology has become much more important. So these are things which the Economic Resilience Task Force will talk about. So I think we can take heart from all this. We don't have to panic. We have plans to help fellow Singaporeans tie through and go through this together. Okay, so thank you all very much for your time and hope to see you all around.